Hello and welcome to ACS's Industry Insights. My name is Dr. Ian Opperman and I'm the Vice President of the Australian Computer Society. Industry Insights is a series that features some of ICT's most respected leaders, exploring innovation, challenges and opportunities in the constantly evolving tech world. These interviews have been designed to allow you, ACS members and our viewers to submit your questions and have them answered by our experts. Please send your questions through YouTube, Facebook or Twitter using the hashtag ACSLive. Our eighth industry leader is John Banks, Business Unit Director of Microfocus. John, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ian, for the opportunity to speak with you and the community online.
Fantastic. John, over the years you've worked for various companies including IBM, AMP, PM Tours and Hewlett-Packard. You've also been involved with the ACS previously. Take us on your journey.
Sure. I mean, I've been with the industry 30 years, and in fact, when I finished at Charles Sturt University and came to Sydney, joined AMP, it wasn't referred to as an industry. People asked, did you work in insurance or banking, and that idea actually developed over time. Yes, I was there as AMP about 10 years in wealth management and worked in IT development, operations, a whole range of areas. In fact, interestingly, I'd studied mainframe technologies mostly at university, and one of the first tasks in the commercial world was to learn this tool called Lotus 123 and run a training course on it. And I just realised I'd wasted 2 years at university, because if you had a tool on a desk that could actually do that capability, then why did you need to sit down and do all the extensive programming and design and everything else that was required? So quite a learning exercise. Yeah, I'd certainly worked in other industries as well. Actually went back to school and did a marketing degree at UTS, and that led me off to the Gold Coast to work with Japanese tourists coming into Australia, running inbound tours and marine sports, and had a golf tours capability as well. My sons often wondered why I'd left that industry and came back to IT, which I have obviously. Yeah, I had about 17 years with IBM, which was fantastic in terms of travelling the world and working in a whole range of countries, mostly through Southeast Asia and Japan and China. You know, fantastic experiences. And most recently, of course, you know, I've had 5 years or so over in the Middle East, and working with companies right through that region as well, which is, you know, very culturally different certainly here to Australia. But I've now returned, of course, back to Australia with Microfocus, and looking forward to you know, launching sort of the new Microfocus back here in Australia.
That's an extremely rich experience, extremely rich set of different countries and environments you've operated in. Can you share some of the most valuable lessons that you've learnt, both during your time in Australia and overseas, and provide some insight into areas that you think Australia is doing well and areas that Australia could really learn from? Okay,
yeah, good. I think Australia is very good at teaming cross-culturally. I have noticed that obviously as I've travelled around the world. It's quite a unique capability here in Australia. I'm not quite sure if that's because of our social learning with sport and so on in this country, but certainly in most of the rest of the world, you know, authority comes with the job. Here in Australia, you have to earn it, and in order to lead teams, that's a skill that most Australians generally have. From the point of view of other things to learn elsewhere in the world, I see that other countries do tend to specialise in particular areas of IT, if not a whole industry. They have certainly punched above their weight in terms of capability. Singapore, for example, is well recognised in logistics and banking, you know, through a lot of the parts of the world that I've worked. And then you've got other countries such as Israel, who do a lot of technology development, particularly in the security spaces. Now, there are some social and regional reasons why these skills have developed, if you think of those two countries. But my observation is they're small, but really do have good experience and are well received globally, and Australia could certainly learn from that sort of approach to business.
Great, fantastic. So Microfocus itself is a success story. Can you tell us a little bit more about Microfocus and its aims to innovate and its approach to delivering high quality scalable software?
Yeah, sure. So Micro Focus has been in the industry certainly as long as I have. It's a well-known name in a lot of traditional technology areas. Over the last few decades has been very successful in acquiring companies whose technology is grounded in a whole range of customers globally and continues to be in demand all the time. Through last year, however, there's been a number of major acquisitions, one of which is acquisition of basically HP's software arm, and this has increased Micro Focus's scale quite significantly. We're now the 8th largest software infrastructure company in the world, and that is really based around our intent to continue to take to market what customers want, and that is really what Micro Focus is about today is scalable, secure infrastructure of enterprise scale for companies.
Great. R&D is considered to be essential for transforming economies to meet future needs and future challenges. Australia's business ICT related spending is, however, relatively low according to ACS's Digital Pulse from 2017. Can you tell us about Micro Focus's philosophy behind R&D and how it's helping to drive Australia to the forefront of the world's top R&D investment economies?
Yep. So Micro Focus, as I said, is very much listens to the customer base. And so the technology that we have either through acquisition or development is very much what customers are after. So our R&D teams will continue to work on any technology, regardless of when it was developed initially, regardless of current trends in technology development, if it's what customers are using and if it's what customers are still wanting in the market. Our R&D teams have really never decommissioned anything that is still required by clients, right back to COBOL Micro Focus, absolutely still a part of the portfolio, right through to the very latest operations management containerised tools that we're taking into the market today. We will continue to support what it is that customers are wanting to invest in and keep in their business. At the same time, we of course bring into our development approach the latest tools and approaches that make sense for us to actually build out that technology and take it to market.
It's quite an interesting position when we're still talking about COBOL in the 21st century in 2018, but I think it actually does reflect the fact that there is still quite a lot of dependence on early solutions which were developed. It's amazing that they still operate, and it's amazing that we can still find people who are able to improve or in fact just keep them running.
Well, Ian, you'd be around long enough to know that by 1990 there'd be no mainframes left on the planet.
Absolutely.
So most of my clients I've worked with for over 20 years still continue to use a lot of that technology because it is secure and it does provide the high scale and performance that they need to run real business transactions, right? So there's still demand for that, and we still look after the software required to keep that in the forefront of customer support.
So a related question, Micro Focus has more than 5,800 employees in R&D, and I understand that you have quite a large technical team reporting to you. Can you explain the key areas in which these employees focus on to solve technology and business problems for your customer? You certainly talked about the philosophy, but can you really speak to the key areas that these folks are working on?
Yeah, so our teams are very much working on a whole range of different technology areas, as you would expect globally. We have development teams right across the world, typically where there are skill sets associated with the technology area we are developing. So we do have a security portfolio. We have very strong application development tools as a portfolio, operations management, content management capabilities, particularly in government, most of which is developed here in Australia, actually out of Canberra. So our R&D teams do specialise in the technologies that they work on, but we have across the board approaches to R&D which are very localised, I think, and quite innovative for a large infrastructure company like ourselves. An example of that is we actually allow or encourage crowdsourcing around development of our technology, and I don't mean bug fix. I literally mean new feature capability and so on, and that's being built into all of our platforms. So genuinely allow the customers to ask for, you know, the new capability that they may have seen elsewhere that makes sense and is something that we should actually change in our technology. And so that's a key aspect of asking the market to advise us on really what we should be doing with the technology, and I think that's, you know, comes back to collaboration as a general concept. Secondly, however, you know, it's very obvious there's a millennial shift in terms of way technology is actually used, not so much developed, that's what we specialise in, but the way it's actually used. So we have dedicated user experience teams now, which actually work right across our entire portfolio, and most of the people in those teams are not IT folk. They come from graphics design backgrounds, you know, even artists, through to language usability and these sorts of skills, so that we are able to build into, you know, the core user interface and usability of our products, things that millennials will look for. Because fundamentally, you know, there's a shift. People won't test things nowadays. They just expect it to work first shot. They expect it to work the ways in which they're used to working, and we think there's a critical overlap between traditional IT R&D and the ability to bring that to the forefront of anything that we take to market.
In your response, you touched on quite a few what we might call mega trends, things that are really shaping the world around us, including how people use technology. There's another trend, of course. Historically, IT investment has been focused very much on saving cost or increasing the level of efficiency of different outcomes. But in ACS's recently published A Vision Splendid, this book discussed how knowledge workers are at risk of having their own tasks automated, so people in very IT-focused industries. What's your general view on automation, and how can businesses best be served by orchestration software?
Mm-hmm. I think a part answer to that is what is knowledge management. You know, I started in IT at a time when you had still had typing pools, although using computers as opposed to keyboards. Documents were still prepared by hand and provided to the workers who had a high level of capability and knowledge to actually turn out documents in those facilities. You know, a decade later, we would have talked a lot about expert systems and how do we bring those expert systems into an organisation and make better use of those skills. And over time, I think we've all seen that a lot of tasks that might have been seen as quite leading edge in the day would then become considered mundane, you know, 5 years, even 10 years later. And that is an ongoing trend across this industry, but also other industries as well. I think the importance of you know, orchestration as opposed to automation, which is more about high-speed processing of an existing known process. Orchestration is about bringing together processes which are asynchronous, you know, take time, require perhaps user input or human input to make some decisions, and I think that is a step towards ultimately what would become more highly automated. So it's a reality, perhaps, that as society and our use of technology becomes more widespread and just moves forward, then you're naturally going to see jobs that were called high knowledge move to a different level of automation, and I think that's quite a natural change of affairs, and certainly is going to happen in Australia as it is elsewhere in the world.
Thanks, John. We're going to take a quick break now. Don't forget to send your questions through using the hashtag ACS Live, and we'll be back to answer them in a moment. Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next generation superheroes will be those embracing technology by being brave and being bold. They'll be solving cybercrime, homelessness, and Alzheimer's, assuring our national security, our energy supply, and saving lives. Superheroes will be the thinkers, the dreamers, the visionaries, and the revolutionaries. Our vision is for Australia to be a world leader in technology talent, one where every child can change the world.
Welcome back to ACS Industry Insights. I'm Dr. Ian Opperman, and joining me is John Banks, Business Unit Director of Microfocus. Our first viewer question comes from Ben Cutter. How do you think systems like Apple Pay will change the future? Will it be a key thing for all banks?
Look, I think different methods of payment management and so on has been happening in a whole range of the areas of the banking industry. Apple, of course, has a huge retail audience worldwide, so is in a position, obviously, to leverage that and be seen as very important in the market. But of course, Google Pay, Facebook Pay, I mean, the opportunity for organisations who have broad reach to expand their business model is going to be available to anybody. So I think the reality is that there will be changes in the market because of these technologies, but exactly what's that going to look like? Well, some of these companies will need to shoot it out.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Now, another question. Shiv from YouTube asks, how significant is DevOps now, and as more and more people are adopting it?
That's a really good question. So DevOps is real, is my short answer to that. I think one of the key changes that's happening, not just actually in the IT industry, is the whole concept of Agile, which was actually stolen, if you like, from the automotive industry and brought into IT. And I think that mindset that we can cycle things quickly is very important. And the reality is that it's not just the development process that needs to be handled swifter. It's the ability to then push that into your operational environment. There's no point developing apps at a very fast rate compared to what we traditionally did if you can't deploy it and make that available to the production world. And that's really what the DevOps story is now all about. It's being able to cycle quickly through the idea generation, the innovation itself, and then enable you to push that out into your operational environment. Very important.
I also definitely agree with that. Jodes from Facebook asks, opposed to automation replacing jobs, you mentioned automation. Are you seeing a trend towards augmentation as a transition?
Augmentation in what sense would be my question. I'm not quite sure I'm clear on what that would mean. What do you think, Ian?
So I guess the question is that we're moving towards a higher degree of automation, but before we get to a fully automated world, a fully automated decision, there's going to be an augmentation of some description. So some sort of degree of supervised automation or some components which start to move in that direction as opposed to a complete jump.
Yeah, and I agree. There won't be jump step. As I was suggesting earlier, orchestration is about that. It's about how do we take exceptions, if you like, and then automate that as quickly as possible. And then ultimately, as we've seen through the industry for years, that becomes highly systemised. It becomes a cookie-cutter approach, and that's when you can move to that systematic model. So that idea of blending still the human interface and the human decision process, which is the challenge often, particularly when dealing with exceptions, is going to continue to occur. But once you've undertaken that decision 6 times, 20 times to the same question, you're now ready to truly automate that and then move on to the next challenge. So that makes complete sense.
We always talked about dull, dirty, dangerous being the areas which are most likely to be automated or roboticised. DevOps is obviously very, very high on people's minds. So the next question actually does also speak to DevOps. So every forward-looking company in the world has a digitisation strategy, and they note the forward-looking company. DevOps is an attractive model that helps merge silos teams together into a shiftable collaboration unit. Can you explain what DevOps ideally looks like in the space where people and organisations are properly leveraging this software?
Yeah, I touched on that a moment ago with the other good question on DevOps, but I think the key point here is collaboration, within the organisation and externally, for that matter as well. We see that the best companies working in the DevOps space really break down that silo divide between the development organisation and the operational organisation. Traditionally, IT companies in Australia, we were all under IT. Then we've gone through a phase of separating that out. Development might be handled somewhere else, operations handled by a different business unit. And I think we've come to see the problem with that. is that you end up with one team finger pointing at another team, and the ability for that collaboration to happen now, which can happen now with the technology supporting it as well, is really the big change that's now happening with DevOps, and I think people are really seeing the benefits from that.
What do you think the very, very best DevOps teams look like?
Look, speed to get to the result is a key thing. That's the outcome, right? How they work together, if you're doing stand-ups, working through your stories with the team, these sort of things is all terminology towards how we might approach this. I think language is very important in the way people, approach things. What I'm seeing though is you can, as I said, we've got customers here moving down from annual releases to monthly releases. There are government agencies, even in New South Wales, operating at 2-week release cycles, right? So if you're able to do that, that's pretty impressive change to your business. Then the question is, as I said, can your operations team keep up with that? So really you need to be able to do, operations management at DevOps speed, if you like. So companies that are able to master both of those things and bring them together, I think, are being quite successful.
Great. So a few more of the technology trends that we're all starting to see. So AI, predictive analytics, robotics, chatbots, Internet of Things. As these technologies continue to rapidly evolve, more and more companies are exploring what they can do with these technologies, how they will impact the businesses they operate in. In terms of businesses that you see transforming, do you have any examples of those you see implementing these newer technologies well, and others such as hybrid IT who are bringing hybrid solutions into their operations? So artificial intelligence, I think it's an excellent term because that presumes we know what natural intelligence is to start with. So I prefer a term machine learning because I think it's more granular and easy for people to wrap their head around to some extent, although AI is definitely a term used in the market. We've got a lot of customers adopting that technology, and it is built into capability that we take into the market today. For example, one of our service management platforms enables you to, as an end customer, if you have an issue with your platform, be it mobile phone or desktop, you can screen cap the image and actually submit that as your fault ticket, as opposed to typing down what my problem is, here it is. Our technology will actually do targeted OCR of that and then recommend a solution to your problem, which I think is quite interesting. We have a customer in Norway that actually is in the healthcare sector, and using that technology, most of their traditional responses and scripting was written in English. Because this is actually using machine learning, and people were raising questions in Norwegian, the system actually learnt to respond to questions in Norwegian, because if you have a problem with your interface and you're just trying to reset a password, it's pretty obvious what it is, but if you're asking the question in Norwegian, the machine learning is able to learn that and give you responses in a different language. Now that's not a language example per se, that's an example where the machine learning has gone ahead of what its original design intent was, and it's now giving a better outcome. So they've achieved 70% better efficiency in terms of their IT management, and in the case of a healthcare company that means saving lives. Absolutely, and having learnt Finnish, I can tell you that Norwegian is actually a very difficult language to learn.
There you go. Well, we'll have to get you to try this out and see how difficult.
Now, my favourite topic is data. And as data becomes the main fuel for companies and governments to operate at every level of business, the flip side, or the balancing side, that is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity becomes more and more crucial to organisational survival. One of the policy recommendations of Australia's Digital Pulse 2017 was for Australia to strengthen its cybersecurity capabilities. What steps can businesses and policymakers take practically to ensure that they and their customers have the best safeguards in place, but also do this in a manner that does not stifle innovation in bureaucracy?
So, Ian, you've set me up for this one, given that it's your area of expertise, but I'll give it a shot anyway. I've, as I've said, worked in a lot of interesting parts of the world, and cybersecurity and privacy associated with that, very, very hot topics. It's pretty clear that we've gone past the high school kid sitting in a darkened room with his laptop, breaking into organisations. With state actors and so on now, the cybersecurity side of that question is very real, and should be front of mind, for the country, not just organisations as well. The second part of that is more around privacy and management of that as well, and I think that's just as big a challenge. Although if you've signed on using online browsers and so on, you've already given away a lot of your data anyway. I think the issue is more around management of that and protection of that. To answer your question though, there's a lot of really good technology out there. We provide excellent security tools for development as not so much perimeter security, which other companies provide excellent tools. It's all around the governance, risk and compliance of that. The tools are great, but you need to be across those aspects of the policy, not just from a government point of view, but inside all organisations. And the key message there, I think, is training around all of that. There is a mindset that the CISO owns the responsibility for security in an organisation. True. But everybody has a responsibility for security within their organisations as well as privately. And I think that training and awareness is required, and it continues to be required. No good tool is going to fill in every hole if the whole organisation is not vigilant.
Look, I absolutely agree. And as far as the ACS work in this space, I'd say watch this space. There are good things coming. Also put in a very quick plug for the technical white paper that was published last year in September on data sharing frameworks, which are trust preserving frameworks. But again, watch this space, more good things coming from the ACS. Switching gears again slightly, why don't you take us through some of the current market trends that you and Micro Focus are seeing that are driving Australian business, and how do you see these in the context of trends occurring globally?
Current market trends are cloud, of course. It's real and it's here. I think Australia, is ahead of some countries, behind others. But we are absolutely seeing that is being adopted, right across the region. And there are other parts of the world that just won't move down that path, and most of that's to do with data sovereignty is the main issue. It's not to do with latency of access to your data. It is really around those other more formal issues and policy issues associated with that. Certainly, we've touched on DevOps. As I said, that is happening globally. There are companies right around the world changing the entire way they operate. And in here in Australia as well, not just from an IT point of view, but the way they actually pivot their own investment strategies and so on as an organisation is really changing quite significantly. And on a technology sense, there's this whole new field of development around containers and containerisation, Kubernetes and Docker and so on. And we ourselves have adopted those open source tools, but built it into our own technology stack as an enterprise grade solution now. And there are banking customers such as Societe Generale, excuse my French, who is a major European bank and moving down that containerised path. And that is so that development's one thing, but this is the ability to push out your actual code into the production environment and be able to keep up that pace of change without effectively going through the traditional change windows and so on. So the expectation that you can build it and deploy it at the same speed is really a shift that's happening globally as well.
You've touched on quite a few tech issues and tech trends. And just talking about the DevOps itself, I went just to meetups 3 years ago when DevOps was this new thing coming, and also to Docker meetups where people were talking about this brand new thing. But over this conversation, we've talked about IoT, which didn't exist. Certainly when I started university, it was the internet of people talking to each other. AI was a computer playing chess, and now it's really embedded into every aspect of our lives. With the accelerating rate of change in the markets and in business and of these technologies, How does the current technology professional ensure that their skills and knowledge remain current and meaningful?
Oh, look, that's not easy. I think we are in such a rapidly changing environment that technology professionals really need to be staying current, talking with others in the community, really using external organisations to help you keep up to date. And I guess one of my key thoughts here is that pragmatically speaking, we all know that you're going to have multiple careers, in your working lifetime. That's obvious and is just the way things are. But I think people need to adopt the mindset that you will never finish school.
Great, fantastic, great for education. Now we're going to take a break and we'll get back to you in a moment with your questions. Don't forget to use the hashtag ACS Live. Back soon.
Our next generation superheroes will be those embracing technology by being brave and being bold. They'll be solving cybercrime, homelessness and Alzheimer's, assuring our national security, our energy supply and saving lives. Superheroes will be the thinkers, the dreamers, the visionaries and the revolutionaries. Our vision is for Australia to be a world leader in technology talent, one where every child can change the world.
So welcome back to Industry Insights. I'm Dr. Ian Opperman and joining me is Micro Focus's John Banks. Our next audience question comes from Tommy. How does Micro Focus see AI being used with their customers?
AI is really built into everything that we have in our portfolios in the sense of machine learning, and we actually have a common platform that's used right across the board now, actually with all of the technology suites that we have. As a business, just stepping aside for a moment, we used to have a huge range of actual products, and we've recognised that customers have a common challenge, be it hybrid cloud management, be it data centre or automation or service management. And so we've packaged up a lot of our technology into what we call suites to actually target those areas. Now, the analytics capability that we have built into each of those is common, and so that as our capability learns in one actual category, it can actually share that across to other parts of our portfolio, and indeed third-party products that might not have an AI flavour to them or that learning capability. So we build that into our products and enable it to be shared in a platform sense with other products out in the market which may not have that capability.
That's great, that's really fantastic. Richard Bergman asks if, given your international experience, do you think Australians are somewhat naive as to what global competition is really all about? How different can it be to operating in Australia?
Look, I think it's a great question. The global community really does see competition as a very daily threat. And I don't want to use the word paranoid, but certainly operating internationally, there's much more commercially and politically looking over one shoulder, if you like, as to what the other guy is doing. I mentioned some smaller countries earlier who are often used as role models, but by the same token, you'll find internationally that countries will tend to have someone that they like to watch. So whilst we might play rugby with New Zealand in an international sense, industry by industry, people really pick countries that they line up against and want to beat. And I think that competition is something that would be healthy for us to really think about here and line up and win, against other players commercially is just a healthy competitive environment we should foster.
Absolutely. Our final viewer question comes from Raymond. How do you think cloud-based services for data network and voice services will affect the current IT infrastructure of the companies which adopt it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's the clash of cultures to some extent. That's touching on traditional telephony, which was data-driven now, of course, IP-driven, with the traditional IT environment, and we see more and more now that particularly in telecommunications companies, but this is a broader story, that the CIO runs into the head of network engineering, because these two worlds are using the same terminology now, same technologies to a great extent, and you know, we actually have capabilities in that area in our network operations management area, but it's all around, you know, generically software-defined networks. That's what this is about, and you will see, or we are seeing, you know, that cultural who owns this thing, because it is the same technology. So I see there's great opportunity there, though, because there's commonalities between the two environments. And back to the DevOps divide, if we can get this IT telecommunications divide sorted out, I'm sure there'll be great benefits for organisations who really rely on both sides of that.
Absolutely. It's amazing to see how many different industry sectors, government and even standards-making bodies are having that conversation about who owns the space, or who actually operates in that space, because of the horizontal nature of a lot of the different technologies we're talking about.
Yeah.
If we didn't get to your question, we will be talking to John about them. We'll pass them along to John after the broadcast, and he will post answers on Facebook in the coming days. Thanks very much for that, John.
Absolutely.
Okay, back to our questions. Now, you may not like the term AI, but I'm going to stay with it, at least for a little bit longer. AI engineers and data scientists are perhaps in the highest demand to support the rise of AI-dependent, data-driven tech in the Internet of Things environment. But the global demand for digital talent has only just begun. What other promising roles should budding technologists be looking to target as they move further along with their studies and training?
Look, I think the answer to that is what I call crossover industry skills. It's not about IT. It's about how do we use IT in other contexts. I might give a controversial example. You know, Australia is perhaps one of the world's biggest developers of gaming software in poker machine industry, and that relies heavily on visual and audio cue skills in order to elicit responses, you know, from the people using the technology. That's a very different range of skills to then go and code it. Okay. In a more positive sense, though, you know, I've seen recently in the medical industry tools using effectively gaming devices to train neurosurgeons in keyhole surgery, right? Because that is not just a medical theoretical skill; it's also a manual dexterity skill. So there you're combining 3D imagery with gamification with medicine. So skills are very different, and it's a matter of how you blend those skills in a cross-industry sense. IT is critical to drive a lot of that, but clearly, you know, there's a lot of other skills are needed. So be a painter, study music, because these skills will all be relevant.
Well, absolutely, and that user-centric design and the ability to really personalise those services is really being applied everywhere. And the examples you gave, I think, are perfectly good examples. One of my first ever days at CSIRO, the team at the Royal Brisbane Hospital showed me their colonoscopy simulator and played the video of the colonoscopy simulation against a real colonoscopy and asked me to pick the difference. I politely stepped out of the room at that point. It was a very, very real experience.
Okay.
It was all about training doctors to be more, have greater fidelity in when they're plucking polyps, and there was a wide range of skills there.
And you concluded medicine wasn't your industry?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, moving on from colonoscopies and back to the questions we have at hand.
Thank you.
What are the thoughts on the rise of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain tech that underlies it?
Look, I think blockchain's a really exciting capability, not because of currencies per se, but in other industries. I mean, blockchain is really about traceability and trust. So there's work being done here in Australia in the farming community. You know, I'm actually from the land originally, and when you're talking about paddock to plate, the traceability of beef, for example, traceability of medicines, where are they coming from, to, I think is a really exciting area to be developed. You know, in the wine industry, we'll know about champagne and Moët, which is IP protected industries and so on. But why can't we do the same for beef or cherry production or fruit production elsewhere in the Australian industry? And that's just an agricultural application of blockchain. So I think the ability for that tool set to be used in a whole range of industries is really unexplored.
We've covered a fairly wide range of topics so far. beyond what we've discussed, or perhaps even emphasising some of the things that we've discussed, how can entrepreneurs, governments, business and other stakeholders in Australia accelerate the Australian digital economy, which, according to ACS's Digital Pulse, is growing fast, but still only forecast to make about 7% of Australia's GDP by 2020?
Yeah, look, I think industry and commercial organisations need to share more information about what's possible and what can be done today. One of the big changes is that back in the day, to trial a new innovation, you would have to get together your testing team, get together your business analysts, go through the tests, and then hope that someone in the meantime had shortcut the 3-month cycle to run up the servers, to run a production environment, to do performance testing and so on. Today that's all gone. I mean, that's available as a cloud service. As long as you've got an IP address, you can get access to most of that sort of capability very quickly. Your development cycles are dramatically reduced. In Micro Focus, for example, 2 weeks is pretty much our turnaround cycle. It takes us 90 days to productise that to market, but that's how quickly you can turn things around. So my comment to innovators and commercial organisations here, it's an overused term, but fail fast. It's the cost of failing is no longer prohibitive, and so there's opportunity there to take an idea right through prototyping and actually take it out to your business and let them test it and see what it's like. And then equally working with government, there's a lot of collaboration opportunity there, to explore what can actually be done. And I think if we all invest in that and not be afraid to invest in that, it's going to be a great opportunity for the economy.
Fantastic, that's wonderful. Last question. We're sitting in exactly the same spot 5 years from now. We're going through the same set of questions. What are we talking about? And then, what are your predictions for the future?
It's a big question. As I said, I've worked a lot with overseas countries. So I think Japan is going through an interesting social change at the moment, which I'm referring to as population cliff, if you like. And that is by 2050, 80-year-olds will be the oldest part of their population. They had more people last year than they have this year, and there'll be less people again next year. So they're on a decline of the population itself. India is going through exactly the same demographic change. It's only 50 years behind. Australia is somewhere in the middle. So what this means is that healthcare, mobility, all these sort of services, we just aren't going to have enough younger people to look after the ageing population itself. And so back to the theme which has sort of come out here through this discussion is that we have to automate. Robotics is going to become mandatory, and these sort of capabilities I don't see as disruptive to us. In fact, I think they'll be essential to maintaining the society that we're used to. So that's a big call, but it's a reality of what's actually going on demographically globally.
Fantastic. So I look forward to having that meeting in 5 years' time, back in the same location. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for on this episode of ACS Industry Insights. I'd like to thank John Banks of Micro Focus for being so generous with his time and knowledge, and I'd like to thank you, our viewers, for your insightful questions also. Stay tuned to acs.org.au to find out about upcoming episodes of ACS Industry Insights. And until next time, I'm Dr. Ian Opperman. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. John, that was great.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Thanks.